In the world of sleep coaching, there are certain eternal questions, questions that come up regardless of how long we struggled, where on the planet we are, our age, and other circumstances, just as there are certain eternal existential questions like, is there such a thing as true free will, and how big is the universe? And one of these eternal questions in the world of sleep coaching is, am I sleepy enough to go to bed? And that's the question we're going to talk about today. So if you had a question, this video is definitely for you. It is a very common one, and I often hear it in this shape or in this form. Am I sleepy enough to go to bed? And I think you'll find a lot of value here and some entertainment as well. We're going to go in a little, in a little bit different directions than we usually do, including starting off with an old CBTi proverb. We're going to look at that and learn from that, and in learning from it, answer this eternal question of, am I sleepy enough to go to bed? So what is this old CBTi proverb? Well, it is this one. You don't go to the dinner table and wait to become hungry. And I've heard that actually attributed to Matthew Walker. Somebody said he said this and thought that was very insightful. I don't know where it comes from, but I've heard it more than once from the CBTi community. And there's a lot to learn from this because the thing is, like, when I first heard it, it sort of was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Of course, like, I wouldn't go to the dinner table and just sit there and like wait to become hungry. Like, what would do that? Of course, the kind of follow-up thought that comes from there is like, of course, I just go to the dinner table when I am hungry and then I eat. And then the natural conclusion becomes, of course, I should wait till I'm sleepy before I go to bed. Aha, that's kind of where this old CBTi proverb can lead, but not so fast. Again, I just kind of shared what we often think when we hear this, and we think, okay, this makes total sense. I'll do the same thing for sleep. But it's really, really helpful to ponder where this thinking leads. So stop and ponder where this leads. So I picked out 3 things that I thought we could ponder together here. 1, 2, 3. And the first one is this: do we really wait until we have that ideal hunger level before we go to the dinner table? Is that how we live our lives? If we just think about this, like when it's like around maybe 4 or 5 p.m., do we start monitoring, like, am I sleepy? Am I hungry enough? Not really. I should wait a little bit. Like, oh yeah, there it is. Now I'm hungry enough. Now I'm gonna go. Maybe not. Second thing to ponder is, do we actually like closely monitor our appetite and satiety levels to decide when to start eating and also when to stop eating? As we're eating, do we go like, okay, my satiety level is at a 3, I'll keep going, and now it's at a 4. What cues? I have these cues now. This is it. Do we really do that? And then finally, think about this. If we would approach appetite like this, if we thought, for example, that our health depends on us going to the dinner table at the exact right moment, when our satiety when our hunger levels the right moment, if the cues are just perfectly aligned, if we have to go to the dinner table at that moment, or there will be some trouble with their health or something like that, what would that do to our appetite? Let's ponder those things together here. Hopefully we've already done some pondering here, and we are already ready to answer these questions. So the answers to these 3 questions, in my humble opinion, are: number 1, do we really wait until we have the ideal hunger levels to go to the dinner table? I would say no, or not really. Of course, sometimes we feel hungry, like, I'm hungry, it's time to have dinner. Yeah, that can happen, but it's not like we closely monitor that to find the exact right moment. We don't do that. And number 2 is the same. Like, it's not like we sort of like consciously look for cues that we are full to stop eating. We don't do that. And the third one, I think, is maybe the most helpful one to really, really ponder is, what would happen if we thought it was really important that our hunger levels were ideal before we go to the dinner table? We would not feel hungry. We would become this preoccupation, this worry, and this deliberation, all this stuff would make us so hyper aroused that we wouldn't even feel hungry. Okay. So before we go to sort of the 2 follow-up questions, which is like, how do we actually decide, and why does getting it right not become a source of anxiety when it comes to dinner? I think to sort of summarize where we are so far, we have seen that this old CBTi proverb is actually, it's not accurate. We don't wait till we have the ideal level of hunger before we go to have dinner. And also, if we would do that, our hunger would decrease. We wouldn't feel hungry because of anxiety. And we can see that the same thing happens when it comes to sleep. That if we try to really look for the cues, the perfect ideal thing, then that monitoring will lead to us not feeling sleepy. So that's kind of where we are now. And again, there are two questions that sort of this naturally leads to. And one is, so how do we actually decide when to go to the dinner table? And why does kind of getting it right not become a source of anxiety when it comes to going to the dinner table? And I'm going to answer them kind of in the reverse order, and starting with B. And it's because hunger ends with an active process. Um, our appetite as well as our sleep drive, our body's sort of like sleep hunger, if you will. They're both they're both these processes that are passive, and the longer we've gone without eating, the more hungry we become, and the longer we've gone without sleeping, the more of a sleep drive develops. But the difference is how that ends. Sleep is a passive process, and it ends when we're sleepy and we're not worried about sleep. We're not trying to sleep; it just happens, right? Versus hunger and appetite, which ends with an active process. We put things in our mouth, we chew them, we eat them, and we can eat. Even if we're not hungry, we can actually eat. And if we're hungry, we can decide not to eat. It's sort of, we have control over that. We have willful control over that, so it doesn't become a source of anxiety, right? And so the final thing here is or the final of the two questions is, how do we actually decide? Well, in reality, we go to the dinner table when we feel like it, or when the timing is right, when we mostly go, when it's our habit. Like, there's no deliberation around it. That's just how it happens. And before we sort of summarize this, and say, and answer sort of like, what can we do? I want to say this, that a natural thought that could come up is like, okay, hearing all this, it can be sort of disappointing that sleep is passive, eating is active, right? And we can easily think like, oh, I wish I could just make myself sleep the same way I can just make myself eat. I can decide when to eat. But again, like, if we think about this a little more, maybe that's not really what we would like. Because think about this. We can actually hurt ourselves by eating too much. We can eat so much that we become quite unhealthy, right? And we can also hurt ourselves by eating too little. And this is because we can override whatever signals and processes are happening in our body. But sleep is not like that. Sleep is regulated in a passive way. We don't have access to how sleep is regulated. So we can actually not hurt ourselves by sleeping too much or too little. The body can produce sleep by itself. It doesn't need nutrients. So we're completely safe in this regard. Not that, to my knowledge, there's any possibility even of hurting ourselves by sleeping too much or too little. There's no evidence for that, but just in theory, we can see that when something is regulated in an automatic way, it becomes, there's no way we can. It's not even possible to sleep so little that we hurt ourselves, because the body just produces sleep when it needs it, right? So that can be a little bit, that can take away a little bit of that disappointment we can feel when we don't have active control over something. When we think about what would actually happen if we had active control over things, or willful control of things, could be a little tricky there. So in summary, we have seen here that looking for the ideal sleepiness cue, or cues of sleepiness, that in itself, that creates struggle. So just deciding, like, when, am I sleepy enough to go to bed? That sort of question itself, or the thinking that there is an ideal level of sleepiness that should, be the cue for us going to bed, that in itself creates struggle. So in this scenario, I think when it comes to this particular thing, it's often helpful for us not to listen to the quote unquote experts, but someone else entirely, which is, of course, ourselves, yourself. Because in reality, we have the answers inside us. If you find that just tuning into these videos and the free content here, you see the answers clearly, well, that's amazing. On the flip side, if those are difficult to see, if you find yourself a little bit lost and confused, then know that's what we're here for. We're really, really happy to get a chance to help you. So you can just, again, if you miss that person you were before, that person who just went to bed and slept, and and didn't spend much time pondering these things, like if you miss that person, of course, head over to thesleepcoachschool.com, and we'd be so happy to help you on your path to becoming that person that you're missing. With that said, I hope this was helpful to you, and look forward to having you back real soon. Until then, stay out of trouble. Bye for now.